Hey reader, welcome back to the channel. This is Centaur here, and yeah, my wife had a really long day today, and Baby Centaur is still taking forever to fall asleep. Yeah, I know, really exciting, huh? Great, fun day. Got to go see grandparents, that was so fun. But yeah, I got back from playing a preparatory game of Bolt Action for the Nova Open today with a buddy of mine, Creighton, who's appeared on the channel before. Hey, Creighton. If you haven't seen his video interview talking with me about Soviet Scouts, you really should, because Soviet Scouts are really good, really effective in 3rd edition, and you should totally take a look at them. But one of the things that came up in our conversation as we were kind of talking over stuff is the whole glancing damage table, superficial damage table that we get over here in Bolt Action 3rd edition. And he asked a question which I hadn't really thought about before, but I think it's an important one, and that is, like, do we need it? Right? Like is it actually necessary? And I'll lay out the argument for why it may not be necessary, and then I'm going to lay out why I think we have it and what it's designed to do, because I think it does actually fill a purpose and a role with the level of complexity that it has. And so we'll just kind of walk through it. So first things first, in case you don't know, there are technically 2 different ways to do damage to vehicles. Obviously, soft targets like people, but also people who man artillery, as well as soft skin vehicles. If you get a successful wound against their damage value and they don't cover save it, then they're just gone, right? But in the case of an armored vehicle, so anything with damage value 7 and above, you start by rolling to hit as per normal. And then you roll for a cover save if there is a cover save at whatever that value is. And if it goes through, then you roll for damage and you add your penetration modifier. And if you get exactly the amount, you get like superficial damage, glancing hit, for lack of a better term. And then if you do more than that, then you do full damage. And if you get 3 or more above the value, then you get double damage, okay? And of course, if you don't meet the value, then you don't do damage, right? You do get the pin for hitting them, assuming that you can successfully pin them, but we're rolling for damage, and it presumably matters, so presumably you are going to pin it, right? Because you can potentially damage it, because we're already at the point of talking about doing damage to things. Also, hi, why aren't you falling asleep, little mate? You should fall asleep. Anyway, so the way the chart works, it's kind of an interesting concept, right? Where, whereas for normal damage, it's like, okay, you get the crew down, you immobilize. Yeah, I know, that's your favorite one, right? Crew going down because it means nothing too bad happens to it, right? That's exactly right. Or maybe, the vehicle is immobilized or it's set on fire, and then of course on a 4+, then it blows up, right? It's just gone, it's destroyed, right? 50% chance you're going to destroy it. If stacking an extra pin and then rolling for morale check is sufficient to cause them to panic, then that could be really bad as well. But you kind of get the idea, right, in terms of how this goes. Herein lies the problem with the glancing damage chart, right, your superficial damage chart. So it's kind of the same in that, like, it could just be a case of, like, crew's a little fouled up, or you're immobilized or set on fire. But you also have things like turret jam, which I would devote a decent bit of time in this video to. It could be something like, they have a compromised steering, so they lose a pivot. And eventually when they lose enough pivots, they get down to 0. Yeah, you love going after the pivots, don't you? It really helps. Then they get immobilized. And as a quick reminder, 2 immobilized results on a vehicle is a destroyed result. Okay, they do add up. And then you can also give them like engine damage. So that way the engine just, it doesn't work quite as well. So it counts as a slow vehicle. If it has fast, it loses fast. If it doesn't have fast, then it counts as slow. And if it has slow already, then it counts as immobilized. Okay, so you kind of have like a gradation going on over here. And this is, it's cool. It's interesting. But one of the questions that Creighton came up with, and I thought it was quite insightful, was like, how often does it actually matter? Right? Because, if I shoot at a vehicle and, let's say I make it slow, right? Which happened in our game. Well, if I'm not really moving around all that much with that vehicle, if it's already on the objective that it's on, does it come up? Right? Is it really worth all that much? And would a crew down result actually be better? Because at least the vehicle goes down, whereas on the, engine damage, and this is also true on pivots, this is true on turret jam, the crew doesn't go down. as I recall. So, like, does it help? Right? Like, how much of a difference does it actually make? But it typically takes time for players to go look it up and make sure that they're getting the right result on the chart. And I think that's an important point, right? Are we adding extra for no particular big reason? And then Turret Jam, of course, this also came up in our game because we had a case of Engine Slow, and then we also had a case of Turret Jam. Turret Jam, it's interesting how it's worded, right? Where it's not the direction you were facing and you get jammed in that direction. It's not you get jammed even in the direction where the shot came from, which I believe was the wording in 2nd edition. In 3rd edition, it gets jammed in the direction of the closest enemy in line of sight, which is a very interesting thing because it means it has no reference frame to where you started with the turret facing. It has no reference frame to where the attack comes from. It is purely centered on what the nearest enemy is. It is also, complete aside, not focused on where the nearest enemy is that you can attack, right? So if you have, like, say, a Polar 7 TP tank, right? One of my favorite tanks. Because I actually run things that are not just tank cats when I run Poland. With that one, you've got 2, like, single machine gun mini turrets, effectively. And so, if you get turret jam, the closest target might be an armored vehicle. And so you get jammed in that direction, right? That may not be all that helpful, right? and so you may need to turn the vehicle and things like that. But, all of this was, it's questions I hadn't really thought about. And so on my little over an hour drive, getting back from Creighton's house, I was thinking about it, and I was like, actually, I think there might actually be a purpose to some of this. First of all, I suspect that the changes to the glancing chart was due to the fact that they were like, okay, well, we're going to make it so soft skins are a good bit more dangerous to run now. So that way we shouldn't see quite as many people bringing trucks to the very front lines. And I think that's healthy. We still see people taking them because they want the transport capacity for pretty cheap. And that's good too, right? They're making an interesting trade. We've seen a lot more armored transports in 3rd edition than we ever saw in 2nd edition. I think that's a fair statement. Although some, maybe we see less than we used to, right? The Brand Carrier isn't nearly as common now as it used to be. That being said, the glancing, damage chart going from just a -3 on the normal, so it's going to be mostly crew down, is an interesting change, and I wonder if part of the reason why it underwent this change was to help bigger armored vehicles. Damage value 9, 10, 11, and in the case of a attack against the very front of an IS-3, damage value 12, right? Because when you think about it, if even just glancing damage had a 2 in 3 chance of causing the crew to go down, and then, actually had a 100% chance of getting the crew to go down, right? Because you'd either get a crew down result, an immobilize result, or a non-fire result, all of which puts the crew down, right? So if that's the case, you don't have to penetrate it, right? You just put it down every single turn. And now you got so many AT rifles, you got so many autocannons running around. Maybe that's good enough against a DV9 armored vehicle, right? You don't necessarily have to penetrate it. And maybe they wanted to give it a little more. So they said, okay, well, actually, most of the results, if you just barely glance it, so like pen +2, but to the side arc, so it now becomes pen +3 against most things, unless you're talking Char B1s, right? Or another armored all-around DV9. If that's the situation, well, then maybe it's a good idea to say, well, you're not actually going to put it down. You might give it an extra pin, maybe. So they still have a reason to rally or something else like that, try to get rid of it, but you're not fully putting them down. You can't just say, okay, well, we took care of you for this turn. Now I'm just going to move on with all the rest of my stuff, right? And go after the rest of your army. You kind of have to go after the armored vehicle some more. And that's something I hadn't really thought about, right? The turret jam thing I still think is a problem because, again, I just kind of wonder, like, how necessary, I get it. I feel like it's designed so that way people didn't get, like, their turrets facing in a really weird way, especially if they were already immobilized or something like that. So it at least guarantees that they're lined up to be able to shoot at stuff. So I think it's more of a feel-good thing for the guy on the receiving end, where, okay, well, yes, your turret did get jammed. You're not going to, you don't get the full benefits of being 360-degree fire arc, But at the same time, at least you're facing in the direction that's useful, right? And there's nothing wrong with feel-good stuff, right? I mean, especially with something that's based on a die roll, it can be kind of nice if somebody's going to get gimmicked into something that's going to be painful, that it's not horrific, because again, it's not like they chose it, right? There's nothing they could do about it. It was a random die roll. So, toward that, I think that could be useful too. Another thing though, and this might just be my thinking on it as to why they have this. I think it's because they wanted people's damage, especially against larger vehicles. If they're struggling to penetrate, and then they penetrate, I think they wanted it to feel like you were doing more than you were otherwise, right? Because, if I'm running an early war army and people start running DV-10 armor against me, right? Technically, those did exist in the early war, especially in the Soviet Union. But, my Polish army, which is my go-to army, we max out at Pen +4, right? And we get those on a couple of tanks, not very many. And then we get them on artillery pieces, which is, again, a little bit tricky to line up and get it to work. You kind of need to be playing on a battle where people have to send armor to a specific spot in order to really make that work. You might find that you are really struggling to actually do damage to a unit, right? Especially if you're at longer range and you're getting Pen +3 instead of Pen +4. And so I feel like, yeah, if a guy like me is doing it and I'm like, okay, well, yeah, okay, great, I got your crew down. Well, I'm going to have to do the exact same thing next turn, right? It didn't feel like I did very much, right? And maybe they just wanted it to feel like you were doing more, and to kind of change things up a bit. So I said, well, let's give some interesting different options, so that way, even if you're mostly just glancing things, at least you feel like you're doing something interesting. And if that's the thinking, that's actually a good idea. Okay, as a guy who's done some game design in the past and who's been in beta and given rules recommendations to other companies for other war games, I can tell you for a fact that anytime that you can make it so that a player is doing something interesting with their activation, that's generally a positive, okay, when it comes to game design. Now, herein lies the problem, and Creighton brought this up, and I thought this was a really, really astute observation. The problem, of course, that comes with this is, especially if there are a lot of armored vehicles in play, is you might need to use tokens and markers to explain what has happened to a vehicle, right? We had a situation where, one vehicle got turret jammed, but it didn't really make a difference in the grand scheme of things because the vehicle got removed like a turn later. One of my vehicles got slowed, so instead of being normal speed, it became slow speed. I remembered, and I made sure to always activate it accordingly. But yeah, at a point you might be in need of putting a whole bunch of tokens down right on top of a vehicle, and maybe that doesn't feel quite good for gamers either. So I just posit this without a whole lot of finality on this, because I see the reasoning for both. But I'm just kind of curious, if you were to go to an event where they were to say superficial damage simply becomes standard damage chart -3, like it was in 2nd edition, right? So we really only have one chart. It's just that now on a superficial damage, a 6 will get you an on fire result, a 5 will get you an immobilized result, and a 4 or lower will give you a crew down result. Would you be upset? Would it cause problems? Would that be something that you would not enjoy? I'm inclined to leave it as it is right now, although maybe get together. I feel like maybe somebody has a token set or something like that. Back of my head says it could be Dewey Cat Productions, but I'm not actually sure about that. I know he has a really great set for showing mortars ranging in and things like that. I just can't remember if Mark's built us one for tank damage and things like that. And Mark, this is not a request in case you're looking for this. I know you're busy. So by all means, please continue on our Kickstarter. We really love that Kickstarter. I'm so looking forward to Coastal Weapons. This is going to be super fun. But just suffice it to say, would that be an issue for you guys? Is this the kind of thing that is interesting in 3rd edition, but not interesting enough to make up for all the extra busy work? Or is this something that you really, really love? Baby Centaur has not fallen asleep, but I think I am going to just call the video there, and I'll just muse more, I guess, in order to try to get her to fall asleep. Please do let me know, though, if you have any thoughts down in the comments below, and I will see you next time.